Hey everyone, welcome to Group Dentistry Now's DSO Study Club webinar series. There we are. Sorry, we had a little bit of technical difficulty, so we were a minute delayed, but we're going to give everybody a couple of minutes to file in, and then we'll get things kicked off. Our focus is going to be on AI and human teams, and really talk about this really interesting phenomenon we have going on here, the convergence of AI, this exponential growth, how it fits into dentistry, how people are dealing with it or not dealing with it. And so we've got a bunch of experts here that are going to share their thoughts. I'm really excited to have this conversation. We had a ton of interest, and I will just say this up front. We have more questions from registrants than we're going to be able to answer within an hour time frame, but we're going to do our darndest to answer all those questions. And we really appreciate everybody for asking those questions. We've tried to organize those here. Thank you to John Schwartz and AI helping us organize those questions as well. But they are from you. They're from real people and not from AI. So we do definitely appreciate the great questions. That's the way we're going to handle this. This is going to be a panel discussion. It is not going to be a PowerPoint slides. John was totally against that, and I think Amy and Julieanne concur. So this is going to be just a conversation based on the questions that you all brought in. And if you maybe have another question or want to just kind of hear somebody say something and you want to question them, just type in the Q&A area. We'll be monitoring that, and we can answer some of those questions that come in, as we see fit. So I think at 3:03 now, why don't I'll do this. I'm going to drop our screen share here, and so you get to see everybody that's actually on the webinar here. Then we're going to go through some introductions, and we'll get into those questions. And just a couple of things real quick. This is being recorded, so hopefully you'll be able to hang out for the entire hour. But if for some reason you have to drop off, this recording will be available. And also, please share it with people that maybe weren't able to attend. It'll be on groupdentistrynow.com and then also on our YouTube channel. Give us about an hour to get this thing processed and up on the website, but it will be there. And then you'll get a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to get in touch with John at Weave. And if you need to see a demo or ask him any questions, and also there'll be a link to the video as well. So I think with that, why don't we kick things off, and we will start introductions. This is, again, AI plus human teams, the new operating model for high growth DSOs and solo practices and emerging groups and all of dentistry. So we're just not saying just for the large groups out there. Why don't we kick things off with an intro? Amy, why don't we start with you, a little bit about your background, your role, and then we'll move on to Julieanne.
Awesome. My name is Amy Manzo. I've been in dentistry, pushing 30 years now, so I'm going to age myself here for a minute. I've done every position in a practice except dentistry itself and a hygienist, starting back to the days of dark rooms and no computers, so way different today. My first computer was a DOS in a dental practice. Looks way different than what we have currently in our practices. I've also owned practices and currently in a role as a senior director of ops.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Julieanne.
Hi, I'm Julieanne O'Connor, and I am the co-founder of Influential Dental with my great partner, Michael Keeter, and we are also the co-hosts of the popular podcast Influential Dental, and also the co-creators of the magazine Influence for Dental Professionals, which is the first and only mindset and lifestyle magazine in the dental space. And we really just help high-achieving dentists and CEOs to take back their quality of life. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Julieanne. And we have with us, last but not least, John Schwartz. And I've known John for, we've been working on 15 plus years, probably, maybe longer.
Yep.
But John's got a ton of experience in the industry. And as of late, I would say the past maybe 7 or 8 years AI specific.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, it's great to be here. Longtime fan, first time guest. But as Bill mentioned, I was at Pearl prior to joining Weave. I was there for 6 years from the beginning with Ophir and took Pearl through their Series B. And for the last 2 years of that engagement, I handled taking Pearl international, so to the UK, Europe, Middle East, and Australia. So that was a lot of fun. I left Pearl in June and joined Weave in October to be their sort of senior director of enterprise and also partnerships. So I work very much in the DSO space with Weave and bringing their message and cooperating with our partners.
Thanks, John. I think we've got a really nice mix here. So we have John with his deep AI experience, Amy with her operational experience, and Julieanne, I think, is we'll talk about the human component that we've included here. And yes, AI is not taking over dental practices, at least not right now, although I don't think it ever will. But some people do, and so I think there's that fear factor, and we're definitely gonna talk a little bit about that. But John, I'd love to let you kick things off, and thank you, by the way, to Weave for sponsoring this. Without Weave sponsorship, we wouldn't have this great conversation. So thanks.
Awesome. So this is a really cool panel, and it's also an issue that I know just at a corporate level, DSOs are very much engaged in. I'm going to spare everybody the what is AI piece. I think you've probably seen it on a million podcasts, and thought we would sort of jump right into the nitty gritty in terms of, why AI for the front office and what does this actually mean on the ground? And in sort of preparing for this and thinking about it, we think about this as sort of a human versus AI issue, but really it's just a math problem. If you think about like the amount of unscheduled treatment and phone calls and things that a front office person is supposed to do in a given day at a dental office to be fully 100% optimized, it's truly overwhelming. And actually, it's impossible for humans to make all of those phone calls and do all of that follow up and write all of those things. It's just impossible. So the idea kind of comes down to, how do we leverage AI to do the things that humans actually don't do very well, and then repurpose those humans into things that they do well, sort of having the best of both worlds. And when you think about it, like 57% of offices are spending, an hour or two a day on literally just manual data entry, right? Which that's a perfect thing for the AI to do. 30% are spending like 3 hours or more on it. So how do we address that? And I was, kind of thinking about this, and I'm glad we have the panel that we have because I kind of like to see, Amy, you've actually done this in your office. You brought AI into the office. You've optimized front offices. And I know it's not as simple as just flipping a button or that sort of thing. Can you take us through what that's really like and sort of how you've managed that transition? Because I'm really curious on how you've sort of designated what the AI does and what the humans do and sort of your approach to that.
Sure, absolutely. This is a scary topic, and I think for everybody, especially when you're asking a front office to change their workflow, it really starts with the conversation and then finding a piece of AI that you can implement that creates a workflow that makes them easier for the practice. So if you can listen to the practice, find out an area that they really struggle in and create a solution for them and then present that, that is how you create this AI in the workflow. Now you may not go in and add all these fantastic features at once. It's kind of like a staircase, like you're going to step up to everything they need. But it helps take out that scary piece for them. They're not as scared because you've just created something for them that is a real struggle and provided a solution for them. And that looks different amongst every single practice there is out there. No two practices typically are the same. And that struggle, the same struggles happen, but they're not always identical in every practice. And so really just listening and then figuring out a solution and introducing it that way helps to take the scariest away and helps to get some buy-in. You do need some buy-in. You need them to be committed. If not, you're adding one more platform that they have to utilize that they don't want.
So that's interesting. One of the things that I always think about DSOs, if you think about it, is like every time you add an office to a DSO, you're literally multiplying dysfunction, right?
Mhm.
Because here's a whole new set of workflows, whole new set of personalities, all the drama, all that fun stuff. Anyway, I'm in awe of people like you who can actually do that. How do you approach specifically the workflow issue, right? Like, because I know that workflows are very sacred. And how would you, if you're, let's say you've acquired a new practice, you're trying to get them into the fold using AI, how do you approach that?
Um, it goes back to it goes back to the relationship. So listening, figuring out the pain points, and then approaching it that way. I often use reference of another practice, like they were in your same condition, right? Or they were struggling with the same area, scared about the technology and making changes of their workflow. And so if you can reference something to them, that's how you get in there. I also think, again, once they just see a piece of what AI can help them and make their day-to-day easier, you can then go in and create this workflow for them. And that workflow, they're typically the same. They may vary different. You may be working with a general dentist versus a periodontist, and so maybe that workflow looks a little bit different. But giving them that tool to get their buy-in to you makes all the difference. And for me, there's all these platforms that are out there to use, right? There's no one that, they all offer something different. Figuring out I need to know the platform that I'm asking them to use, that I know how to do it so that I can help them work through the workflow of it. And so from an operating side, it's important that we educate ourselves on the tools that practices can use so that we can also guide them into what is the best option for that practice.
And so it sounds like you're kind of like finding that champion practice that you're going to use as a model for the other practices that are joining, right?
Correct.
And when you're doing that and you're starting to think, and this gets us into a lot of the questions that we got were like, how do you evaluate this stuff? Like how do you know if it's going to work for you? But when you're thinking about it in that context, and you're looking at different software and you're looking at different AI, and this could be broadly, right? What are some of the things that are important to you, again, from that workflow perspective, in integrating it into the practices at scale?
Um, I would say the biggest thing is, again, that I understand the platform that I'm integrating and that I have a good rapport with that vendor so that we're aligned before I execute something going into the practice. Because if there's no alignment there, then we're not on the same page either. Right. I typically anything that has some AI involved in a practice, I meet once a month with the vendor or the AI platform in my team so that we can make sure that the office is using it effectively. And so not only are we talking about implementing it, but then the question is now they have it and the utilization of it. And I also feel like in order to get utilization or for practice to use it and change these workflows, that they need to physically do it. So it's not like just here it is, here's a platform, train them and walk away. That doesn't work. You need to train it. You need to follow up in 5 days, 2 weeks, a month, and really make sure the utilization is there. That's the other keys, the key parts of this workflow scenario.
Interesting. So it's utilization and then holding the vendor accountable for these outcomes, or at least in terms of like making sure everything is smooth and the integration is smooth and having that dialogue with the vendor. Um, I think that a lot of that too, or at least from what I've heard from DSOs, is that there's with a lot of the point solutions that are out there that are kind of in the market, there's a lot of context switching you need to do. So if I'm in one window, I have to move to another window to do this and another window to do that. Um, I was thinking, Julianne, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but can you talk a little bit about sort of the psychological issues involved in context switching so much, and sort of like where that might break down in a practice? I know that you sort of study the psychological element of a DSO. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, sure. So, look, we work with DSOs helping to build elite teams, and it starts from leadership, but then really what we're looking at is sort of the foundation of trust, right? So, in order to build an elite team, which by the way have a lot more fun and they're more effective and they affect the bottom line better, and it all kind of goes in a cycle, right? So, we want all of these things to be considered. So, everything we're talking about from a neuroscience standpoint is going to affect patient care and their case acceptance. Excuse me, had to cough. And it's also going to affect the team collaboration and the dynamic there. And so when we go into work with building an elite team, we really have to start from that foundation of, look, your job is not at risk, right? At the end of the day, the AI here is designed to really give you back the ability to go back to what humans do well, which is connect, right? But the thing that I think we take for granted is both the human and the AI have a neuro, effect, if you will. It basically, both of these things can cause neurochemicals to be released in the brain for the patients and the team. So you're talking about oxytocin and dopamine and these chemicals that are released when we build trust, when we're consistent. So the AI has a place that there's predictability and these things that when these chemicals are released, people can make decisions more easily, right? Their brain is affected in a way that they feel relaxed, that they know that they're motivated to make a decision. So all of these things work hand in hand. One is not without the other. And so when we have AI and people feel scared that they're going to lose their job, or they're fearful that they're not going to provide enough value. So oftentimes people just they undervalue themselves and they overwork. They're in this cycle
Mhm.
of being wired on, if I work really, really, really hard, or I look like I'm overextending myself, then it's going to mean I'm more valuable. That's not actually the case. What we really want to do is we want to get your brain into a place where you can relax and you can be really effective and you can make really good decisions, and your brain is working at a higher capacity, believe it or not. And then you lean into connection, and we take people back to what we originally had in dental practices, which is this idea of really building not only a trusting environment, but something that makes people want to refer people to you, and not
Yeah,
feel sold, right?
yeah, that's really interesting. So just getting kind of closing the loop a little bit on how this engages with AI in the office. In your and Amy as well, right? Like as you're thinking about optimizing for these psychological factors and also for all of the other things we want to optimize for at scale, right? What are the characteristics of the AI that you want to be using? So again, a lot of AI out there. Weave does AI, Pearl does, all these people do lots of AI. It's really cool. It's amazing what's happened, right? But when you think about it, are there any things that you're looking for with the AI when you're making that decision to bring this into your practice that are going to, again, optimize around some of these psychological factors?
Yeah, so I'll jump in and then turn it to Amy because I know you have some reaction to that question. But really, if you're looking at, what is it that causes a team to feel overwhelmed, right? We want them to be able to have some pieces of consistency that are built in that they don't have to keep thinking about. And so there's, everything that systematically can be done by AI, frankly, should be done by AI. Because why would we want to get a human to overwork to do the very same thing that the AI can do in a fraction of a second, or consistently and predictably in a way that you can absolutely depend on it, when the human then can lean into other areas. So, Amy, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree 100%. We've got this feature that can take the errors out of the practice and really, again, like you said, bring that human connection back. That is the key, right? I mean, how many times do you walk into a practice, dental, medical, vet, and they stop working with you because they have to answer the phones, or you have this amazing sign-in sheet that you get a list the time that you walked in the door. And so removing those kinds of obstacles and utilizing AI to handle the things that we do make mistakes. Online booking is huge. We should offer patients convenience at their what works for them. If it's 11 o'clock at night and I forgot I haven't got my teeth cleaned and I need to make an appointment, I should be able to make it from my phone at 11 o'clock at night in my bed. So we need some online scheduling. That's a huge piece here. We talk
And
about
fast
and
too, like
fast.
quick
Yeah.
replies. People need that right away. They want to see that they can rely on you. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. Or how about an emergency? I broke my tooth on Saturday night and I need an appointment Monday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. And now they have to wait and call the practice. And as you know, it's probably the worst time to call because everything else is going on and the phones don't get answered, right? So AI to answer the phones to help with the missed calls. There's another piece that can help. Insurance eligibility. That's a huge one, messing with patients' balances and inaccurate, correct quotes because somebody didn't input the information in correctly is a real problem.
well,
And
what about unscheduled treatment? I mean, I myself right now, I'm trying to get an appointment with my dentist. I told them, and they still haven't called me back. And I'm thinking, why wouldn't I want to come back in? I am that person who doubles up my cleanings. But nobody's reached out to me, and you can have this done by AI, so people don't have to remember. You can't rely
yeah,
on
It,
humans
it
for those open up a can of worms for human error. And unfortunately, it does have an effect on us. I'm dealing with it right now, sincerely.
So
yeah,
it's interesting you mentioned unscheduled treatment because I think that's a place where AI has this incredible exponential opportunity, right?
yes,
The reason, every practice has, between $1 and like $2 million in unscheduled treatment just sitting in their books. So one of the things we've done at Weave, actually, it's been really, really interesting, and we have like 5 pilots that we're doing with this right now that we're going to be releasing data here soon in a white paper. But basically, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, you have Pearl in your practice that's identifying, unscheduled treatment and treatment needs and mistreatment. And what we do is make it so you can kind of programmatically take that data and hand it over to the Weave AI agent in the background. You're not lifting a finger, and that agent is actually going out and getting those appointments booked. So, Julieanne, they might be sending you a text or an email trying to get you back into the chair. But what's wild about that, when you think about it, let's say that $1 million is 1,000 phone calls or 1,000 texts. Those can all go out at once using AI, right? Think about how long it would take your front office person to sit there, like scribble everything out, right? With everything that's going on. So that's one of the places where I think there's just like this incredible opportunity for us to start looking at AI. And it's not just Weave, it's not just what we do, but it's across the organization. I read this thing that by Goldman Sachs saying that something like 25% of all work hours in the United States could very easily be replaced by AI right now. And that's law, that's white collar, that's finance, that's all kinds of places. So, what's that 25% in the day of a dental front office that you could start thinking about what, AI taking over and handling? I think that's one of the questions that we want everybody to focus on when you really sit down with it and think about it. How can you do that? And how can you, as you said, Julianne, re-optimize those hours from your front office folks into something like patient care, right? Doing those little things that actually mean a lot to patients.
Well, and the other
Um,
thing I would say, just add to that, is that what I really love about Weave is that it can keep track of the conversation. So if you're in a text string, an AI text string, it's actually going to know what the people have been saying. And if you rely on humans to remember every conversation that they've had with a patient, forget it, right? But that again builds trust. It releases the oxytocin and it causes the patients to feel heard. So again, it is doing a form of listening, although it's not a human, but that then allows the human to really concentrate on what matters in the connection and take that deeper.
Love that. Yeah, agreed, 100% on that.
Let me interject real quick if you don't mind, because you're right, John. You kind of hit on it. One of the questions that kind of was repeated over and over in different iterations was like, where do we start? And there are so many different AI solutions, and my assumption is some people have already started maybe as simply as like getting a free chat GPT and they're playing around with that, which they have to watch out that they're not putting any patient information in there, but that's a whole different thing. But let's go a little beyond that for the dental practice, and maybe Amy, you can touch on this. Like where did you start?
Uh, it depends on the practice. I mean, I've dabbled in all of it. I think insurance was an easy place to start a couple years ago. And that really made a difference. There are some clinical areas that you could start that's very, very easy to implement, and make the workflow of the team much better. Um, so you asked me where I started. I would say initially it was clinical and insurance eligibility. Online booking, geez, now I'm trying to think, maybe 3 years ago. I started utilizing that, and I'm going to be really honest, that was not an easy, it's not an easy process to really get a practice to work with, but it does make or break a practice in a minute just by having that availability to reach the patients at the time that is convenient for them. So I would tell you find one area in your practice that is the struggle point, one area where you think you can gain some trust from your team. And maybe it's a doctor focus, maybe it is clinical or clinical notes, maybe it's a front office focus, maybe it's insurance eligibility or online scheduling. So that's where I would start, is the biggest weakest point you have in a practice, and implement a solution that helps to get the trust of the team and the trust in AI, and not to be so scared of it.
Amy, just quick question on that. And this is just conversations that I've had with different offices. But so prior to using AI for your booking and that sort of thing, what was a Monday morning like? Like how much time was spent listening to voicemails that came in over the weekend and then having to reschedule and rejigger the sort of appointment diary, right, based on those calls? Because I would imagine, again, I don't work in a dental office, but I would imagine that like you have to get your schedule sorted at the beginning of the week, or else everything just becomes chaos.
That's correct. And not to mention, the front office is probably listening to voicemails, which means nobody's actually answering the phone. That's ringing off the hook to schedule patients who have broken teeth. And if you're looking to grow your practice with new patients and you don't answer the phone, well, they're hanging up and calling the next practice down the road. Not to
Yeah.
mention all the obstacles that maybe the person on the phone gives the patient, and the patient hangs up without an appointment, whereas the AI is there to actually book an appointment for them. So sometimes you may see higher conversion rates utilizing online booking than you do with even a person on the phone. So it does exist. And so now you've lost patience, and by the time you get caught up Monday morning, it's 11 a.m. and Doc is frustrated. He's got a bunch of no-shows, not to mention you've got hygiene gaps, and it's a mess. It's chaotic. And by Monday at noon, the front office wishes it was Friday at 3. So make it easier for them.
And these things compound over time, right?
Right.
Like the dysfunction and the issues really do compound. And this is how potential treatment just falls away and just does not get addressed because we're dealing with these fires that we're constantly putting out. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Julianne, what does that do psychologically in an office? I'm just curious. Like what happens? What's going on in the brain chemistry of people in an office when that happens?
Well, you're talking about increased stress response, cortisol, like all of the stuff that really makes you so you're less effective and not maybe able to make decisions as quickly or easily or as effectively. Also, you see the way that people handle things. It comes across to the patients from an energy standpoint, all sorts of different things. But if you look at all of this, really you got to remember also there's many different types of personalities that we're dealing with. So people come from different backgrounds, people come from different personalities, people make buying decisions very differently. So when you implement AI, what you're doing is you're adding in a varietal, if you will, or a variety of different ways in which you're communicating with people so you can actually reach everybody where they're at. So even if you look at generational gaps and changes and how some people don't want to get on the phone, they just don't. And so, I love getting a text message reminding me about something, an appointment. I love having things confirmed through a text message. And so I do think that there are a lot of things that we take for granted that AI actually serves us with. And then again, it allows the human being to go back to what they do really well. And one of those things is problem solving. So often we go in to build an elite team, and what we find out is that the team already knows what needs to be done to make it better. And the thing is, they never speak up because they're so busy doing all this other stuff that there's never time to ideate. There's never time to sit around and actually have a meeting that is not a complaint session, but it really is there to say, hey, what could we do differently to allow ourselves to take back some of our time and quality of life, right? Which is really, people come to me, they want to be more effective and take back their quality of life. And really, I think that's a human condition.
Absolutely.
Incredible. And Amy, from a management point of view, right? How do you look at that ideation process and sort of the ground up process when you have the time and you have the space to get those ideas together? How do you sort of handle that with your teams that are obviously running very fast, but to Julianne's point, it's really important to start to filter those ideas up.
It is. I think there's time you need to, especially from a dentist standpoint, right? They're in the chair all day. And so you really need to schedule that business time, that time to sit and look at your business and say, here is what is working well, here is what is not working well, and where can we proactively come up with some solutions to better help in the areas that aren't working. And we do run super busy. And so you've got to schedule some time to do that. And to Julianne's point, it's like a staff meeting, right? We go into a staff meeting and it's either proactive and the team is working together on solutions, or else it's a session where everybody's just complaining and there's no action done. And so that's great. We want to hear complaints. Complaints is where you can come up with a system to correct workflows to make it easier. But you also need to focus on the wins of that and the solution. So here's my complaint, here is the solution, and then a system to put that in place that works for the practice. And so
Okay.
I think you need some time. You need to focus on your business.
Right. And
Yeah.
when you've introduced the AI agents into the workflow, right? What's sort of the way that like you discuss this with your team? How do you position like, okay, there's this thing that sort of feels like a human and doing human things autonomously, but also it's just AI and you're our real human in the office. And is there ever any kind of question around that or friction around that particular topic?
Absolutely. There are obstacles every time you present AI in the very beginning. And so you're going to hear obstacles from the staff. And sometimes things don't work right. Sometimes it's a patient obstacle. Maybe how your setting isn't working best for that practice workflow. Sometimes you have to change. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means you didn't set it up correctly in the beginning to get you what your goal was and the outcome.
Yeah.
And so don't think you set up something, like I said, and it works. It's trial and error, and it's following through to make sure that what your goal was the solution you're looking for, and that you set it up correctly. So I think you've got to look at that, um, and then relate to somebody else. Utilize a different story. Utilize yourself. Like Julian said, I need some dental treatment, and they haven't called me. How do you think your patients feel? You've got, $2 million in unscheduled treatment and your team has not reached out to them. How do you think your patients feel? Or they come to you trusting you about an insurance and what their coverage is, and your team did it, but there were some errors in it, and that happens. So patients do trust you, come up with solutions, and then get that trust in from your doctor and your teams as well. And come in with solutions. I promise you, every patient sitting in a dental chair would love more human connection. Nobody wants to sign a sign-in sheet. Nobody wants to have to dig in and provide you an insurance card before they walk in their door, because guess what? They probably don't even have a dental insurance card, right? People want connection when they come in. They want to not be interrupted when they're chatting with the front desk. And so provide solutions that can help you there. I mean, back in the day, we had to have sterile assistants to come in and perio chart. We have systems that now perio chart for you. All you have to do is talk to it. Utilize those programs.
I love what you're saying, Amy. I just want to add to that. Like, if you really think about going to a team and saying, hey, we're going to take some of this stuff that is just, monotonous, and we're going to, give it to AI to handle for you. And you're just going to focus on humanity and creativity and hospitality, and problem solving. And, I mean, can you imagine anyone giving you too much pushback if they knew that their value was tied to that? The problem is they think their value is tied to all of this paperwork and charting and all these things. But the reality is their value is in the fact that they are a human being and they come with their own qualities and their own gifts. And we want to really help them to lean into those things, in the best possible way. So
We didn't even talk about paper forms, right? I mean, John, start
It's
somewhere.
everybody's favorite topic.
Okay, start with patient paper forms. Like you walk into a practice and they give you a clipboard of a copy that's been copied 5,000 times that you can hardly read it, and you tell the patient to fill this out. Is that what they're expecting in the chair from the doctor? Like they're exhausted and they get, have some online forms. Make it convenient to the patient. This is just a waste of time. And now the patient signs it and somebody has to enter it and scan it in. It is a workflow that I guarantee you any practice that is not doing online patient forms has a pile somewhere in their front desk that needs to still be scanned into a patient chart.
That's really dark, Amy.
Huge.
Okay, I want to actually lean in a little bit to. I know that a lot of the questions, Bill, that we received some of them were really around like KPIs, and I think especially at the DSO level, at the enterprise level, we're always looking for the right financial KPIs to measure the efficacy of a new software product in the office. And at least in my experience in the space, that's what everything really comes down to. And that also has a big impact on how people will utilize this software moving forward. So if I know that I'm driving better financial outcomes, then I'm more likely to use this. And there's more adoption, and there's just sort of like more of a, we're going to do this vibe. And when we start to, at Weave, when we start to look at KPIs and we work with our clients on developing these, a few of them really stand out. And I'm going to throw out a few, and I'd love to get your take on it, Amy and Julieanne, other things that you'd actually really look at. But, one of them is just volume, right? Like, what percentage of calls are being answered by the AI or responded to via text or handled? Is the handle rate from the AI that you're using? Some DSOs that we work with say, hey, we want to have AI reach out to every call and answer every call. Most don't, right? They want to have that human engagement first. So we set up a proper phone tree where it goes into the office. If nobody picks up, then it goes to the AI, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of flexibility in that, but the goal is really to have that high percentage of handle rate, especially on the after hours, where a lot of that opportunity just gets missed. I think to your point, about 90% of the people who call and don't get picked up will actually just move on to the next dentist in their discovery. The other is conversion. Obviously, this is sort of where the rubber hits the road. What percentage of unscheduled treatment are we actually converting through the AI efforts that we have, right? What does case acceptance look like? Is AI helping drive your case acceptance? And I think this is a big piece of the puzzle. Because if you can get case acceptance increased by just 2% and you add that to some of the other factors, that's great same-store growth. That's actually really, really good same-store growth. And then also things like utilization. So is the AI in the booking system helping helping increase utilization? Are you putting the high value patients in the limited number of spots that you have in that practice, right? And how can AI help you do that? So anyway, those are just a few of the things that we like to look at and think about at the DSO and corporate level. I'm curious, Amy, what makes sense there, or are there other things that you would add to that? What do you think?
No, I think those are all the KPIs I'd be looking at. The conversion is huge. Some offices I actually have a higher conversion with online and AI communication than I do from a human on the phone. So conversion is a huge, huge piece of that. Treatment acceptance case, we have all kinds of clinical AI systems where it can show the patient and you can text it to the patient their findings, and now you've got some validation behind their treatment. We've got models, we can show patients their teeth and what it would look like if they had some cosmetic work done right from their mouth. I mean, that's huge that we can provide. So I would look at all of those KPIs from your conversion rate, your call answer rate would be a big one. Your treatment acceptance is going to be a huge KPI. And all those are going to drive your production, right? Not to mention that the revenue is going to be cleaner and more time efficient on claims.
I think
Awesome.
I would just add to that. I completely agree with you. I think you guys nailed all the KPIs really, for the most part. When I look at what happens when we free up people's time and we think about the fact that the case acceptance is heavily reliant on how the doctor or the treatment coordinator or whoever is interacting with the patients, and even the front office and everybody's interaction. In fact, what I see is that what we do is we free up time for people to train on the psychology of humans and the psychology of influence. Now there's a new KPI, which is really, what does this look like when people can be more human centered and actually be better? This is not something that's trained in dental in the industry, right? We know that this is not trained in school. They're very heavily technically trained. But when we can start to actually train on these areas and also train on business and train on some certain skills that can really make a difference, then I think you're going to start to see other things that are affecting the bottom line that you're taking for granted right now, or not you guys, but some people are taking for granted. And definitely training is something that's very underrated, I think, right now in our industry.
Absolutely. Bill, I know we have a limited amount of time left. Are there other questions that came in that you'd like us to get to here? Sorry, we kind of went off on a tangent.
Yeah, no, this is great. Yeah, there's some questions here. I think we answered some of them. And Julieanne, I just wanted that last point there about training. I think it is something that, when you look at, I think, and Amy, you could probably speak to this, that I think both clinical and office staff really are hungry for more education and more training, and that's what DSOs and group practices are supposed to provide, right? They're supposed to provide that education and that mentorship and all those things. And I think some of them fall short sometimes. And so I think the freeing up time so people can better look, they have the opportunity to learn, to be mentored, to grow, and also to lean on good vendors that actually provide that support and training, because that's the other thing. Some vendors might have great solutions, but can't help you onboard and train. And we know we have turnover; it's just inevitable. So we need that constant support. So I think that is a really valid point. Education and training. It's something when you're evaluating AI vendors, you should look to what kind of onboarding and training solutions they have, to just to help you. So I'll leave that. Yes, we got a ton of questions here. There were a couple that came in. There was one, and I think John touched on it really briefly. You might not even have realized it, but this one came in with the whole AI era, right? I think it's, this, I guess that's what we could call it. Do you think there's still space for virtual remote humans, right? So teams to help with any pain point. And that's kind of why we called, this the AI plus human teams webinar. I think there still is room for them. It's not everything is going to be AI only, but I'm just curious, Amy and Julianne, I mean, are we going to AI only? Is it going to always be this mix of humans and AI? What does that look like?
Julian, you want to go or you want me to go first?
Yeah, totally up to you.
Okay. Shoot. I mean, the human is never going to leave the dental practice. It's not, right? You're still going to have a human. That is that interaction piece that the patients need. So that's not going to change. Could you have remote employees? Sure. If you have a system like Weave, you have an app on your phone and you can take calls from anywhere. You don't need to be inside the practice. So I think there is a piece for that can still exist. I don't think it's going to be to the capacity that we once needed it. For example, insurance verification, when you have an AI system to do that for you. But I don't think it's going to entirely replace teams. I think teams are going to get slimmer. I have experienced slimming down practices with less team members. However, then you can take care of the team members that you have. They don't want to leave because they're taken care of, and it's still a win-win for everybody. And so, yeah, go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, so I just add to that. So I think what we're going to see is like, look, we can look at history, we can look at, what we predict for the future. And I really think at the end of the day, human beings stay employed if they want to stay employed. And so what we're doing is we're opening up the door for a shift. And we're going to see people that are going to take on completely different types of roles. And there will be remote workforce, but they're going to be doing different things. That's all. And it may be more creative in nature. It may be a lot more fun. Who knows? But they're still going to be problem solving. And what we're seeing is those practices who really understand that the human still has so much value, right? We know that the capacity of the brain is so significant. And so when we see that there's still value in human beings and we support them figuring out a way to provide value and even giving them the opportunity to say, hey, what could you do that is not AI driven that we absolutely need, and allow people to actually come to the table with some of that. I think we're going to just see that there's going to be new opportunities that people come to the table with, and they're going to use AI to actually support them coming up with it too, but they're going to take their ideas and then they're just going to level it up with AI, and then they're going to support you and you're going to have a completely different experience.
Yep.
It's interesting. There's this agentic multiplier effect that happens. We sometimes we think about AI coming in and replacing part of what humans do, but imagine a world where the humans that you've employed come with a team of AI agents, right? So you're literally, every human is kind of multiplying that, and they are somewhat of a manager of these agents to do those little things that really just kind of take up time and kind of reduce some of the cognitive load so that they can do more high level things. And I think very much in our workforce, we're entering that era of, the human comes with a team of AI agents that are there to help.
Absolutely.
So here's another one that came in. And again, I think you touched on this a little bit. How are you defining success of AI initiatives within your organization? So that's really for anybody. Amy, if you want to kind of kick that off, you bring something in, how long do you give it? And, how do you measure success?
Yeah. So going back to earlier, I guess you implement it and you need to follow through. So maybe it's a 5-day check-in, it's 2 weeks check-in. There should be some kind of ROI or statistics that your vendor is providing you, and that utilization piece. So utilization is really where you're going to measure it. Is it working? Is it what you've implemented set up correctly for what the practice needs for their workflows? And if it's not, then tweak it. There are all kinds of different areas that you can implement these, but really just keep a focus on the utilization. And if it's not working, go to your vendor and make some adjustments. Maybe it's some more team training. It does work. It works very well, but you do have to monitor it. This is not a set it and walk away in the beginning. It does not work that way.
And sometimes I'll say, when we work with enterprises, if you sit down with the C team, they'll say something like, well, the metrics here aren't kind of what we expected in terms of conversion. And when you do a deep dive into why that is, you realize that some of the offices are only using maybe 40% of what the Weave platform does, let's say, in that situation. So so that's where utilization is actually going to drive those metrics, and you want to make sure that you have a real handle on both before you start to make any serious decisions. But oftentimes the cause is just utilization. And in my personal opinion, that gets back to this idea of workflow in the practice. Once you introduce a new software to a practice, that is going to disrupt the workflow at some point in some way. And, as Amy was discussing earlier, there are ways around that, but you just want to be thoughtful about that change management that goes on that's actually going to drive the metrics that you want to see with the software. It's not always like, oh, the software isn't great or it doesn't do what I wanted to do. It's I have a team that doesn't really want to embrace this the way that we're hoping they would. So that's where the human piece really comes in.
I would just add to that the other metrics that people take for granted, again, going back to the human side of this, is that sometimes we're looking at the bottom line, but we're not looking at the quality of life of our teams, which really leads to retention. It leads to being able to attract better talent. And there's so many different areas that I think, don't look at right away. And really, at the end of the day, they have a huge, significant impact, and you can absolutely measure it. So I think we have to go back holistic and say, what are all the variables? Because there's so many variables when you work with AI. And when we can start to really look at that, then we can lean in where there's opportunities to actually exploit it even further, if you will.
So what you're saying, Julieanne, is just, you're able to somehow tie turnover or lack of turnover and employee satisfaction to AI, not necessarily to AI, but AI freeing up their time to do something they're better suited for.
Well, let's just take a development path as an example. We know that people that are looking for a DSO to work with want a development path. And if you have the time to provide a development path for people to learn more about psychology, to learn more about case acceptance, to learn more about clinical, whatever that case is, because there's time available, there's a little bit of a length to, before you're going to see that affect the bottom line on some level, right? So there's a little bit of a time, lag, if you will. And so you have to be patient enough to see this through. So you can attract talent that wants that. And then also, as people become more satisfied in the practice, as they settle down, it's hard at first because you're implementing it, you're still scrambling to provide value and fearful of your job. But then the leaders get trained better to teach them that they're secure, right? There's a trust factor. And then now there's less retention. So all of it across the board is going to have an effect, but there is a lag time once you implement AI, and you've got to look at additional metrics.
Correct.
And one last thing I'll just bring up here, and this is for all the IT nerds in the crowd. You want, when you integrate AI software, you want to make sure that it integrates with the software you use, right? How does it integrate in your stack? The most important one probably being the PMS, right? Because that's where a lot of this data comes from. Why this is important, two quick factors here. One of which is your AI is only as smart as the context that you give it. So if you give it depth of context, you give it access to your PMS, to other data, it's going to be a lot more efficient, right? The second is that you want to choose a vendor that has a documented front door relationship for integration with the PMS, meaning they're not going through a backdoor to access the PMS around the PMS's terms of service, right? You want to make sure that that vendor has that relationship. And that ties into security of your data, right? And security of the whole operation. So think about security when you make these decisions, because one data breach, one HIPAA violation, that sort of thing can be devastating from a corporate, legal, financial point of view for a DSO. So you do want to think about those factors as well when you're looking at software.
I would just back that up by saying that it's really important, as somebody who works with the most influential people in the space, the most influential brands in the industry, what we're always looking at is, why did these brands become so influential? And it's usually because they are backed They have the ability to pivot very quickly if there are changes in the industry, and you want to work with a company like Weave, who has built this namesake and this brand for a reason, and they really are going to be able to support you when there are additional changes, which are coming because they're coming, right? So you want to really pick a brand that has a namesake for a reason.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So we're getting towards the end here, and I know John did not want this to be a commercial, but I want to make sure that he actually has a little bit of time to talk about, because this is one of the other things that I think is really confusing in the industry is got a lot of AI solutions out there. We didn't even touch on that, but you've got so many different options. Amy, and I'm sure Julianne would agree, you don't have enough time to evaluate everything. There's just too many options out there. You go to a show and it's AI everything. So, John, can you give us a little bit of a rundown on exactly, what Weave does from an AI perspective? Because it's not just, when we talk about front desk does a lot of different things. So, John, I'll let you kind of, handle things here and close this out.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, at the risk of this being a bit of a promo, a lot of this is why I joined Weave. I mean, to be totally honest, right? Weave is much more than phones, and it's also much more than AI. If you think about the traditional Weave features like call pop, what did that do? It let the front office know who was calling. It created that relationship before the front office even answers the phone, right? That's kind of a core tenet of what we do. We want to connect people. We want to create that connective tissue. So if you think about phones and the software that we have on phones and all the other things that we do, it's about knowing that patient. Now, when we launch AI Receptionist, which we've already launched, AI Receptionist is just the next level of that, right? It's increasing the aperture of what we know about the patient and leveraging that to have meaningful conversations and interactions with those patients in a virtual world. And I think if you look at the entire workflow here, the entire process of what we bring to an organization or a platform, it's creating that relationship, and it's giving you a unified inbox where you can see all of your communication with that patient. And we have this thing called call intelligence that is like sort of granola or whatever for dental offices, where we're listening to every interaction you have with the patient over the phone. And we're taking that, we're analyzing it, we're saying, okay, these are the 4 things you need to do based on that interaction on the phone. That's making you more productive. It's making you more revenue. It's making your front office happier. So when I think about AI, I think about it in the context of a much sort of more rich conversation with your patient that is ultimately going to drive retention. So yes, if you would like to have a demo of this, give me a call, shoot me an email, scan the QR code, whatever you need to do, tell them John sent you. We'll get with you and we'll talk about it. We're also going to be at ADSO and Dykema coming up. We've got a big sort of splash at Dykema and a room you can come to and hang out. Like, love to chat with you there. So thank you for joining. Thanks everybody for being here, especially Amy and Julieanne and Bill. We always enjoy hanging out with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Julianne and Amy. I don't know, Amy and Julianne, if you want to, you've got like a minute here. If you want to shout out best way to connect with you, if anybody wants to reach out, Amy.
Yeah, absolutely. Best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me and I'll definitely give you my cell and we can connect together. Absolutely.
Excellent. Julianne.
And I'm going to go social media on Instagram. You can find me at Influential Dental.
Awesome.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thanks again. Thank you to Weave and John and Amy and Julianne for being on. And thank you everybody for watching us. And again, the recording will be up on the website, groupdentistrynow.com, and also our YouTube channel in the next hour. So thanks, and we'll let you get back to work.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.